Hey gang, what is going on? Welcome back once again to the Square Roundtable, the show where we break down one specific topic about the WWE or maybe in professional wrestling in general. Now, if you look, the topic now is WWE Network. We are coming up to 2 years of the network coming out. It seems like just yesterday. It was actually on February 24th, 2014 that the network...
Man, how time flies.
Yeah, it really does. So the network's been out for 2 years. I have here by my side Mr. Keith Poshik, which...
Good day, sir.
Yeah, you will be joining me on the conversation. Now, Keith, right off the bat, what was your excitement level for the network when it was officially announced?
Let's say cautiously optimistic. It seemed cool, but I was one of those people that was like, yeah, okay, seems cool, but this whole thing is going to be a hot mess. There's no way they can pull this off. And, you know, for the most part, they did.
I remember the first topic was about this. It was about the Monday. How much was it going to cost, right? Because we had a back and forth speculation on the podcast.
Especially back in the day when they were promoting that you could see all the pay-per-views and stuff on there, and you're like, there's no way this isn't going to cost less than a pay-per-view a month. And yeah.
And the whole topic about was it going to include WrestleMania or would you still have to get WrestleMania on pay-per-view? That was still a conversation piece.
Yeah.
So we were thinking about the 15 to 20 to some people maybe even said, oh, you got to spend 30 if you want to get like the premium pay-per-views, the Rumble, Survivor Series, SummerSlam, Mania, $9.99. Keith, what was your reaction?
Seemed cheap. I as a Canadian, I pay less, or it's cost less than Netflix. So I was totally cool with that price point as long as it worked.
Yeah. So same thing. I thought it was a pretty cool thing. I remember when the network was officially announced, I work at some smaller islands in Puerto Rico, and I was staying at one of them, and I made sure the hotel that I selected had Wi-Fi, just so I could, on my phone, watch the live stream announcement of the network. And I would be trying to, like, text you guys, you know, with the little signal that I had, $9.99, all the pay-per-views will be included, a progressive edition of older WWE, WWF, WCW, ECW shows. 2 years in, how do you feel about the network? Is it as key component of your life as you thought it would be?
I think the network is fantastic. It is honestly, in the last 2 years, blown any expectation I had out of the water. It's they've added so much to it. And I'm not here like saying all of the content is great content, because there's been some content on there, but I think it's great. I love the archives in there, going back and watching all of the old Raws, all of the old pay-per-views, even all of the old like ECW and Stampede Wrestling and stuff. I think they've killed it with that. And it's and the what would you call it? The original content.
Yeah, a lot of
awesome
network
on there.
Table for Three, the countdowns. The countdowns were really hot right at the beginning. I guess it was their way of sort of catching you up to date. Like, hey, if you have the network and you're only watching recently, here's a countdown of things that are probably featured in here somewhere.
And while that is cool now, that did take a while for it to really get the ball rolling with that. For the first 6 months to a year almost of network, the original content was almost non-existent, and for a long time that was my biggest knock on the network.
Yeah, because at launch they didn't have every show, because the whole thing was, hey, you're gonna have every show. There were a couple of things excluded, and once that initial reveal was out there, because of the way the network is structured, you don't really know when there's new stuff. There's not a recently added thing like there is on Netflix, so it just felt like, so is it just a steady, stable thing of content that I can just pay $10 and go back into? You didn't really know too much about that.
Because it almost felt like, okay, we have these first initial couple of shows ready lined up, but this is coming in fast. We have nothing else lined up, so let's just record stuff as fast as possible. And that period between those two things was, it sucked, really.
Yeah, and I remember the first couple of pay-per-views.
Yeah.
Just there were a couple of issues that even today some people still suffer, because this is available on Apple TV, PS3, PS4, pretty much anything Android, iOS. Lag, disconnection.
Yeah.
I remember that Ryan also had this issue with one of the NXT rival shows where it would be showing the live match, but then it would cut to a piece of an old NXT episode, not even an Arrival.
That's happened to me a couple times as well. It actually the last pay-per-view, Fastlane, that happened where it was in the middle of the Divas match, and then all of a sudden, boom, it cut back to the Kevin Owens Ziggler match. It was weird.
Yeah, really weird. And obviously, this is not exactly like Netflix because WWE has the on-demand stuff, but then they have the live feed, which includes, a variety of old shows, but then they have different commercials or lower thirds, and they have the actual pay-per-views happen on there. What would you say has been the thing that maybe hasn't worked the best for you? I'm not saying from a technical standpoint, just they put this out there, not for you.
Honestly, the live feed. Like, the live feed is great when it's there, but I never see, unless there's a pay-per-view or something on, I never seek out the live feed. I never just turn my TV on and say like, oh, I wonder what they're showing on the live feed. I'll always go look into the archive. I think they could do so much more with that, and they don't, just period. And that's really about it. Some of the original content, it's one of those things like when it hits, right? Some of the original content is the best thing, but there's been some stinkers when it comes to original content.
I would say, let me transform that a little bit. I think it's been sort of lack of direction because, for example,
Yes.
Table for Three came out at the beginning, right? Everybody loved it. Man, this is it, the show we wanted. But as the episodes kept progressing, it sort of felt a little bit more forced. It was the
felt more
DDP
and
Vader
more.
Sting episode, I believe it was, where at one point he just openly brings up a question out of nowhere that maybe was the editing or something, but it felt so forced. Like, okay, this guy is being fed the questions. And at that point, why not just do a podcast, really?
You're totally right, though. A lot of the network shows, original content-wise, do really, like, follow that curve. Like, think about Swerved, how it was awesome at first, and it just kind of went, like, less exciting. Breaking Ground, I would say the same thing, and I say that as somebody that loves Breaking Ground, where it was awesome at first, and then it just kind of, like, falls into a slump. There's so many examples of that. You're totally right.
I was listening to the Talk is Jericho podcast with Edge and Christian, and I'll be honest, I don't really like the Edge and Christian show that Totally Reeks of Awesomeness too much.
Neither do I.
I get the comedy style that they have, but here's the deal. When it's a 3-minute segment on TV, cool.
Great.
When it's a 25-minute show on the network, it kind of overstates its welcome. Now, here's the positive part of where I think this can lead to. Everything has been up to this point, and my headset fell off. Everything to this point has been sort of too much pulling, the curtain or way too much behind the scenes stuff. The Edge and Christian show that Totally Reeks of Awesomeness is the first real show that they have where it is a show on the network that is not interview based. It is not behind the curtain. It is not the making of. It is simply a show that, much like it would be on Netflix or anything else, it's on the network. And I think that's where they need to go. They're going to have that cartoon show coming out this year. And maybe they just went too much, hey, let's do a bunch of countdowns, let's do a bunch of interviews. After a while, they start blending in together.
Yeah, you're totally right. Especially with interview stuff. You can only ask somebody so many questions, right, before it becomes redundant. So, yeah, even though that is the stuff that everybody says they want, maybe they should pull back a little bit from that.
Yeah, because it's odd when even on Raw they will bring up, and we talked about this in the podcast. It's so forced. Like, hey, you won't see me and Goldust on an episode of WWE Right Along on the WWE Network. Who talks like that. But even those shows, after a couple of episodes, you kind of get the feeling like these guys are forced to just be entertaining at some point, because otherwise it's an episode of guys just driving from one town to another.
Exactly. It feels like they're going for a whole thing of authenticity, but because there's a camera in their front of their face, it's never going to achieve that.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about some things that could maybe improve or maybe have not worked. What would you say has been your favorite combination or your favorite different pieces of content on the network? Not just one.
WWE 24. Even though I'm just going to choose one. WWE 24, even though you mentioned that you want less of that behind-the-scenes stuff, when it comes to content like WWE 24, especially the WrestleMania episodes, they're just so good. They're so good. The panel stuff I really like as well, like those JBL interviews.
He's
where
great.
He sits down. There was that Undertaker panel, the Eric Bischoff episode. Even in like the archives, there's those old Legends of Wrestling panels that are just so good. I love stuff like that, and that's what I want to see more of on the network.
And I get why you like 24, and even though it does sort of, go behind the scenes, it's different because it goes behind the scene towards this event. Like, it has a conclusion. Any interview, the show goes on after. But 24, here's WrestleMania, here's the build-up, and then you know what happened. Just watch the show.
And I love how it's like months and months after. We're so far removed from it. It almost adds that whole mystique of like, okay, this is what was actually happening that day. And you can kind of think about like, okay, it's funny that this guy made this comment because this happened and that. I love the fact that it's so late.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of my favorite pieces of content, and we've brought this up, that it's brand new now, is the WWE Collections, where finally we have a chance to... It's not really about rivalries because they literally have a show, which they should put more pieces of content to. That's one thing.
Agreed.
Quick side note, too many shows that start and then
Never
they're
finish.
just there.
Yep.
Too many.
No, that's a giant peeve of the network. They need have a little bit of like finality there.
Yeah.
Just please.
But now back to that. I like the combination of shows that do have the different interviews, and now talking about 24, I really like that. And then Collections does give you a chance to see Brock Lesnar from his debut segment. It doesn't have to be an hour-long interview up until whatever, Dana Bryan retired. Great. Then let's highlight his dark match without commentary. I know that was on his DVD, but here it is on the network. You can highlight TLC matches. I do wish they added a play all button so we wouldn't have to just get the intro every single time. Yeah, they really need to work on that.
That or just make more intros. So if I'm watching a 2-minute clip of Brock Lesnar, I don't have to see the Edging Christian every Monday following Raw 17 times.
But you love the little music, though. It's soothing.
Yeah. It's funny? You can say the network intro music, and I guarantee everybody that's watching this video is hearing it in their head right now.
I wonder who has it as a text message alert or something. Hey, you got a text message. Next up.
That would drive me crazy. But
yeah, next up, so we've talked about things we like, maybe things we don't, things that could improve. What has the network taught you or exposed you to something? Maybe it's a show, maybe it's a specific event that you would have never seen at any point, but because either it was somewhere highlighted or maybe somebody linked to it, you watched it, and you maybe wouldn't have.
The year 1995 to about 1997, for whatever reason, I've gone back and gone through the whole like Shawn Michaels, Psycho Sid, Diesel era and watched all of those pay-per-views and segments. I don't know why, but it's totally stuck out to me. And yeah, there's some good matches in there. There's some really good matches in there. But yeah, for whatever reason so that's why I love the network so much, is because you can just go like, I don't know, let's watch a Survivor Series 1996, sure, let's watch that one. Or 1997, sure, let's watch that one. You can just go through, watch a random thing, have no context, and try to... One of my favorite things to do is build the context in your head. Like, as an example, Survivor Series 1997, they had... I had totally forgotten that the New Rockers were a thing, where it was like Marty Jannetty and Al Snow, and you try to think like, oh god, Al Snow. Okay, and then you go through the whole career of Al Snow in your head. And just those little things. That's what's great about the network.
For me, it's actually just reliving the Attitude Era, because I watched the DVDs for the WWF pay-per-views because I watched Nitro, not Raw. I didn't even have the USA Network at the time, or TNN later on, until after WCW was bought out. So I had this actual pretty dark black period where I couldn't watch neither one because one of them went out of business. But we'd just be able to watch random Raws. Yeah, I've actually just watched a lot of the high-rated segment Raws just to get the context. One thing that's like, cool, that segment was great, but everything else about the show is like a lot of DQs or interruptions.
Oh, but that's what I love watching, especially in the Attitude Era. Just that stuff that everybody's forgotten, like the feud between the Nation of Domination and the Disciples of the Apocalypse, and how just shilly they were with their Titan bikes, and how Jim Cornette tried to bring back the NWA at one point in the Attitude Era. All that stuff is great. I love seeing all of that.
Yeah, it is really great. Now, Keith.
Yes.
You get your value. I'm assuming based on what we're talking about, $9.99. You get all the shows. Now we get the Saturday special sometimes, like WWE Roadblock, Beast in the East. So it's not
the
just
network
about...
is a great value.
Yeah. Now, what do you need? What is not on the network that you think should be added? Maybe it's a show. Maybe it's a feature.
I would like a thing kind of like the way that Stone Cold Steve Austin goes on his podcast and kind of goes and talks through some of his old matches, like, the one with WrestleMania 17. I would like a show where just, let's say, Triple H and The Undertaker sit down and go through their Hell in a Cell match, as an example, or something like that, or like Flair and Steamboat sit down and go through one of their classic matches. Just a bunch of stuff like that, where you just two people talking over their matches, reliving it, maybe pointing out some weird, minute things that only they would know. I want more of that so badly, and it's one of those things that I didn't even know I wanted until Stone Cold Steve Austin did it, and now I just any little bit of that, I just eat it up. So more of that on the network, would love it.
That's actually not bad. I would like to see that. Online people have taken that commentary that Stone Cold has, and obviously they put it, up on Daily Motion or something, so you can see that synchronized with the match, and that is great. That is something that I agree should be something that is there. I still would like the network to be more involved with what I do. One thing I love about Netflix is that based on whatever I'm watching, it will modify itself. Even with the comedy movies, it doesn't matter.
Kind of like the recommended, like, oh, hey, you liked Super Brawl 93. You might like Starcade 92 or something like that.
Exactly. But I always feel like, okay, there's new stuff. The network to this day, we're 2 years in, and there's been a lot of things added. They keep adding ECWs, etc. But when you go to the website or the app, it feels like it is still just the network, like it came out. And I would like that, just for me to go to the main page and here are these new things. Here's the hottest thing of the week. Coming soon.
Even like customized playlists. So say you put together all of your favorite Monday Night Raws, you could share it and somebody else could check it out. That would be cool.
Yeah, and you can do that, but you can't do that through the app. You can link.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Just like a nice place to put it all together.
And something that's so simple, or I don't really know how simple it is, but I think would be great value, much like Netflix. Hey, if you like this Brock Lesnar match, you may want to check out this one. If it can actually give you a specific promo recommendations based on promos or matches based on matches or storylines. So, hey, if you like this storyline from 2005, why not check out a similar storyline from 1991? It's like, what?
Yeah.
1991? Then you can see similarities. So it gives you an incentive to really go back in time and check out the stuff, compare, and I would love that.
Yeah, or even something like, hey, you really like the Big Boss Man. Maybe you don't know that he was the Guardian Angel in WCW. Check out some of his WCW stuff. That's a weird example, but
Guardian
whatever.
I actually saw a WCW pay-per-view recently with that, and I just asked myself, who thought the Guardian Angel was a good name for a wrestler?
Yeah.
Why?
Who thought half the things in WCW were a good idea?
Yeah. So
but here we are.
So for those watching, a couple of questions. Number one, what has been your favorite piece of content available on the WWE Network? And much like what we discussed at the end, what do you think would be cool to see on the network that is not previously available, whether it be a show or a feature? Drop those in the comment section. Also, if you have recommendations for any topics for us to discuss here and the Score
or really
Roundtables.
Anything on the network, if there's something on the network that, like, this is my favorite thing and you need to watch this, let us know and we'll check it out.
Yeah, like, hey, there's this show from 1989 that people think, slow-paced wrestling, but, this is so different. Maybe it's a hitting Ricky Steamboat match somewhere in there. Drop those suggestions in the comment section as well. Check out the podcast, available every single Tuesday. We have Fight Night. We have a ton, over 20, over 30 different score roundtables available now. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, they're piling up.
Yeah, they are piling up. So thank you for watching. And until next time, we will be back with tons more right here on Byte That.
Yeah.